An intense storm brought down all surveillance drones and gave the Russians a false sense of security. At 5:42 a.m., a column of 22 armored vehicles advanced slowly through the mud, believing they were protected by the bad weather. But just a few kilometers away, Ukrainian teams were analyzing weather radar data and identified a 12-minute window in which the rain would lessen directly over the convoy. While the Russians saw the weather as protection, the Ukrainians treated it as a forecast and an opportunity. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. When the rain turned to drizzle, the Ukrainians launched 18 FPV drones in less than a minute. To avoid collisions and maximize the attack, they divided the swarm into 3 altitude layers, creating a coordinated and simultaneous approach. The train, trapped on a narrow track in a straight line, became the worst possible target. Slow, predictable, and exposed. What seemed like shelter turned into an inevitable destruction zone. The drones were inexpensive, built with commercial components costing around $500 each, but they carried enough concentrated kinetic energy to completely disable a multi-million-dollar main battle tank if they hit the correct structural point. However, at the exact moment the Ukrainian drones activated their transmitters and saturated the airspace with analog video feeds and control signals, the Russian electronic warfare defense activated. A LIR-2 vehicle, securely integrated into the center of the armored column, instantly detected the massive increase in radio frequency emissions. The Russian defense system didn't need to physically see the drones. It only needed to listen to the digital noise they transmitted. By analyzing the microscopic difference in the arrival time of control signals from multiple antennas, the LIR-2 computers instantly triangulated the exact geographic coordinates of the Ukrainian operators hidden in the tree line 6 kilometers away. Electronic warfare officers immediately relayed these precise coordinates to a rear artillery battery and an Orlan-30 reconnaissance drone orbiting above the storm layer. The Orlan-30, equipped with a specialized laser designator, began marking Ukrainian positions with an invisible infrared beam, guiding precision artillery projectiles. The Ukrainian operators now had armed drones in the air, but the invisible link between their controls and these aircraft had just painted a huge, luminous target on their own backs. The geometry of the battlefield violently compressed in a matter of seconds. The Russian battery fired the first salvo of guided munitions, meaning that high-explosive projectiles were already on a trajectory toward the Ukrainian launch positions, while the swarm was still 2 kilometers from the armored column. The Ukrainian teams were instantly forced to execute a sequence of high-risk control transfers, a highly specialized relay tactic specifically designed to neutralize Russian signal triangulation. Ukrainian operators transferred control of the drones mid-flight to secondary teams, narrowly escaping a bombing raid that destroyed the launch sites. During the transition, the drones briefly lost control, but the connection was re-established in time. With their batteries nearly depleted and the weather worsening again, only a few minutes remained before the final attack. The Russian column responded with intense fire and activated advanced systems such as the BMPT Terminator, designed to destroy aerial threats. However, the Russian system was not prepared to handle 18 simultaneous drones coming from different altitudes. The software crashed, unable to maintain focus on multiple identical targets. The drones then attacked with precision, bypassing the heavy armor and targeting vulnerable points, engines, vents, and turret joints. Instead of brute force, they used surgical precision. The result? A cheap swarm overwhelmed sophisticated systems, exploiting technological and tactical limitations on the modern battlefield. When a $500 device, made of plastic and wire and fitted with a shaped charge, strikes the rear of the engine compartment of a multi-million-dollar tank, The resulting explosion propels a jet of superheated copper directly through the engine block, instantly igniting the fuel lines and detonating the internal ammunition carousel. The entire armored column came to a catastrophic halt as the front and rear vehicles were simultaneously immobilized, trapping the remainder of the convoy on the narrow dirt road. The Russian crews, realizing their metal fortresses had become stationary targets, began abandoning their vehicles in panic and running through the mud, trading the illusion of armored protection for the desperate hope of surviving on foot. The initial attack had trapped the column, but a disabled battle tank is still an armored bunker, capable of firing its main gun or being recovered later. Ukrainian doctrine dictated that immobilization was not enough. Complete structural annihilation was necessary. As the remaining drones from the first wave descended, they were not directed at the fleeing soldiers. They were guided directly to the open hatches left behind by the panicked Russian crews. When a 2-kilogram-shaped charge detonates inside the sealed compartment of a T-72 tank, the overpressure and thermal spike instantly ignite the automatic ammunition loader stored directly beneath the turret. The resulting chain reaction detonation, involving up to 40 high-explosive projectiles, transforms the 45-ton vehicle into a veritable steel volcano, launching the 12-ton turret dozens of meters into the air. This follow-up tactic ensured that no recovery vehicle could tow this equipment back for maintenance. The vehicles were permanently removed from the Russian order of battle, transformed into flaming monuments of twisted metal along the muddy road. The remaining operators guided their charges with cold mechanical precision, ignoring the intense tracer fire that still cut through the air, prioritizing the total destruction of the heavier armored vehicles. The most critical target of the entire convoy, however, was not the heavy armored vehicle. It was the LIR-2 electronic warfare vehicle, the same system that had nearly killed the Ukrainian operators minutes earlier. The LIR-2 was a high-value asset, a sophisticated mobile command center designed to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. At that moment, it was emitting an immense dome of interference, desperately trying to block the control signals of the approaching second wave of drones. But the Russian countermeasures were based on an outdated assumption of static frequencies. The Ukrainian operators used advanced frequency-hopping algorithms, which changed their control channels hundreds of times per second across a wide spectrum. LIR-2 was, in practice, attempting to contain a flood by plugging individual holes in a dam, while the water simply flowed around. A single quadcopter, piloted by a secondary operator lying in a waterlogged trench, crossed a microsecond gap in the interference field. He completely ignored the heavy tanks and sped straight toward the forest of antennas jutting from the roof of the LIR-2. The drone struck the main sensor array, instantly blinding the entire Russian column and severing its digital connection to the artillery batteries supporting them. This brutal confrontation, which lasted less than 8 minutes, perfectly encapsulated the new and ruthless economics of asymmetric warfare. The Russian Federation had spent tens of millions of dollars on heavy armor, advanced electronic warfare systems, and guided artillery on that single main road. In contrast, Ukrainian forces spent less than $25,000 on commercial drone components, cable ties, and repurposed anti-tank ammunition. It was a complete inversion of traditional military mathematics, in which the cost of destroying a target was historically proportional to the target's value. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian drone teams were already on the move. They operated with extreme mobility, with such a reduced physical presence that they were practically invisible. The moment their screens went blank after the final detonations, they stowed their handheld controllers in waterproof bags, mounted off, rode electric motorcycles hidden nearby, and disappeared into the dense forest. Miles away, centralized Russian artillery batteries, bound by rigid doctrinal response cycles, finally received authorization to fire their second barrage. They unleashed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of high-explosive projectiles on the devastated and empty tree line where drone teams had been 10 minutes earlier, destroying nothing but earth and debris. Artillery firing missions required multiple layers of authorization, passing from observers on the front line to battalion commanders and finally to battery officers before a single projectile could be fired. Each step introduced friction into the system, small delays that accumulated into a critical delay. This centralized response cycle meant that even when their advanced electronic warfare systems instantly detected a threat, locating drone operators in seconds, effective retaliation was delayed by minutes. In modern combat, minutes are an eternity, an impossible gap to close between detection and destruction. On the other hand, the Ukrainian teams operated with total decentralization and lethal autonomy, functioning more like a distributed network than a traditional unit. They didn't need a general to authorize an attack. Operators on the ground had the authority to identify, track, and destroy high-value targets in real time, compressing the attack chain into a continuous, uninterrupted action. Russian artillery continued bombarding the barren, waterlogged terrain where the Ukrainians had been, rigidly following a protocol based on fixed coordinates, rooted in assumptions of static warfare, while those truly responsible were already miles away, sending images of the attack to encrypted networks, simultaneously transforming the battlefield into a combat zone and a real-time stream of intelligence and propaganda. This brief and violent, mud-filled confrontation in eastern Ukraine illustrates a fundamental and frightening shift in the landscape of modern warfare, challenging decades of assumptions about power, protection, and dominance. The battlefield has evolved into an environment where absolute visibility immediately translates into absolute vulnerability, where being seen, even for an instant, often equates to being identified and destroyed. For decades, military dominance was defined by the use of massive, heavily armored platforms that projected power through size, firepower, and technological superiority. Tanks, armored vehicles, and mechanized columns were designed to break through lines and hold territory, operating under the premise that their armor and support systems could absorb or deflect most threats. Today, that premise has collapsed. Deploying a multi-million-dollar asset on a contested battlefield without flawless, impenetrable anti-drone cover is, in practice, painting a target on it for any operator with a $500 quadcopter and a basic understanding of geometry, trajectory, and vulnerable points. The heavy armor that once defined ground supremacy is now routinely hunted down and destroyed by disposable commercial-grade technology, operated by soldiers watching screens, far removed from the physical danger of the target. The fundamental mathematics of war has been permanently rewritten. A superpower can no longer simply buy victory by fielding the most expensive tanks or the most sophisticated vehicles, because its adversaries have discovered how to render these fortresses obsolete using mass-produced plastic, open-source software, and improvised explosives. When the torrential rain finally returned to cover the smoldering wreckage of the Russian column, it washed away not only burning steel, it also washed away the remnants of an outdated military doctrine that failed to adapt to a rapidly changing reality. The era of the invincible armored spearhead has definitively sunk into the mud, replaced by a terrifying new reality where the sky is teeming with cheap, buzzing predators that can appear without warning and disappear just as quickly. The implications of this shift go far beyond a single destroyed convoy. They signal a collapse in the traditional relationship between cost, protection, and survivability on the battlefield, undermining decades of acquisition strategies and defense planning. For years, military planning was based on the idea that more investment in armor, countermeasures, and layered defenses would mean greater survivability on the battlefield. Today, this logic no longer works. In a scenario where threats are cheap, numerous, and almost invisible until the last moment, the traditional parameters of power, armor thickness, caliber, and cost cease to be decisive. Instead, factors such as adaptability, redundancy, and speed of response become more important. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.